there's this beautiful poem. It's in the book of Isaiah.
The city of Jerusalem has just been destroyed by Babylon, a great kingdom in the north. And all of these Jewish people, they've been sent away into exile, but a few remained in the city. And they're left wondering, what just happened? Has our God abandoned us?
Right, because Jerusalem was supposed to be the city where God would reign over the world to bring peace and blessing to everyone.
Yeah, so they're starting in this really important part of Israel's history in the Old Testament, and that's the Babylonian exile. And so God's chosen people had been warned over and over and over again, you are not keeping covenant. You are not upholding this deal that we made where I would be your God and you would be my people and you would follow the 10 Commandments and all the other laws. And so prophet after prophet had warned them, if you guys don't change your act, there's going to be this consequence, and this is the consequence. The Neo-Babylonian Empire comes in and pretty much wipes them out. And it's this really tragic part of the Old Testament narrative, and you can read more about it in books like Jeremiah, who's a prophet who kind of lives through it. Ezekiel is a prophet who lives through it, but from Babylon. If you think about Daniel and him being in the lion's den, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those are all during this time also. So that gives us a little bit of where we're at in the story.
Monica's a high school Bible teacher. I was a pastor for 10 years, and so we love watching Bible Project videos and thinking through them. What comes to my mind is the Exodus from Egypt, that this is a people whose imagination has been shaped by freedom from captivity, right? We spent 400 years in Egypt. We never, ever, ever want to go back to that. And suddenly they're back in captivity. And so any sort of pride or self-assurance that they had is completely wiped out because we have failed God, we're back in captivity. Is there any hope for us? And I think Isaiah is going to provide some hope.
Yeah.
Now, Isaiah had been saying that Jerusalem's destruction was a mess of Israel's own making. They had turned away from their God, become corrupt, and so their city and their temple were destroyed.
Yeah, everything seems lost.
But the poem goes on. There's a watchman on the city walls. And far out on the hills, we see a messenger, and he's running towards the city. He's running and he's shouting, "Good news!" And Isaiah says, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news."
Beautiful feet?
Yes, the feet are beautiful because they're carrying a beautiful message.
What's the message?
Makes me think of the story of where the marathon comes from, right? That the guy was running the 27.2 miles, whatever it is, and he delivers his message. But I think he died right away. And so we commemorate that by running marathons for fun.
When I pastored a church, we church planted, and I had this definition of what is a church plant. It's a new church start where we share the news about Jesus. And I put on that poster the passage in Romans where he's quoting Isaiah where it says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." And that is the mission of the church, to share the good news, to share the cosmic, the holistic good news that God has come to bring people out of captivity, to sin, to its destructive nature. And it's exciting to be a part of that. And hearing this poem, it's a reminder that this is a message that's been going on for a long time in the nation of Israel, that God has always been planning to bring his people out of captivity. And maybe as the Israelites were stuck in captivity in Egypt, and then even as they were in Israel, they were still in a form of captivity. It was just to their sin, right? To the destructive nature of their sin. And Jesus, God, through Christ, has plans to bring about the ultimate restoration.
Yeah, and just that picture, Bible Project is so great. They're so artistic, but I was almost getting teary-eyed of the light, right, and the hope that in this place of just darkness and hopelessness, there's this glimmer of hope that something is here, something is coming, and it's going to be good news.
Let's hear what that good news is.
That despite Jerusalem's destruction, Israel's God still reigns as king, and that God himself is going to one day return to this city, take up his throne, and bring peace.
And the watchmen sing for joy because of the good news that their God still reigns.
Now, in the New Testament, we find this same phrase, the good news. It's the Greek word euangelion, and it's also sometimes translated with the word gospel.
Yeah, so when Christians say, "Do you believe the gospel?" they mean, do you believe the news?
But not just any news. In the Bible, this phrase is always about the announcement of the reign of a new king. And in the New Testament, the Gospels use this phrase to summarize all of Jesus' teachings.
King and kingdom, that's not something that necessarily feels that natural to us. Like, I live in America, maybe you live in a nation on the other part of the world that has a king or a queen, and yet Israelites would have seen a king with kind of these tainted eyes again, this tainted memory, right? That like they've had kings, and some kings have been good with a track record, right? David, the greatest, and Solomon also had like real struggles with sin, and then they had a long line of like really bad kings that led them into exile, and for God to say, there is going to come a king, and it's actually, he said in, 2 Samuel, from the line of David, who will sit on a throne, who will deliver his people. Like, this is good news, right? And what I do like about this video too is that it's giving us a vision of that good news that is all of Jesus's teaching. I think sometimes the word gospel can get condensed into like the doctrine of justification as modern day Christians, and I like that it is that, but it's also more than that. And it's all of Jesus's teachings is gospel. All of Jesus's teachings for our life is good news.
Yeah, and even being in a, American democracy, we haven't had a king in this country. There's still something that like stirs our heart, and there's a reason that fairy tales have the longevity that they have, that there's something in us that is calling out for this idea of a king, but not a king in this world. Not that we're longing for a monarchical system of government, but there's just something in us that is stirred by this idea of the good king who can actually come and do what he's supposed to do, be that true king that we all need.
Well, I think if we confuse the leaders in this world with the ultimate king, like if we look to our geopolitical leaders and say, you're going to bring about God's kingdom on earth, then we're not actually believing good news or promising good news. We're actually promising a form of bad news, because Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world, right? And yet he is bringing the kingdom of God. He says the kingdom is here. It's among you. And it's like this mystery that like Jesus is bringing the kingdom, but it's not here yet. It's here partially, and yet it's coming. So it's an interesting tension to live with that kingdom message in light of the time we live.
Yeah.
They say that he went about proclaiming the good news of God's kingdom.
So Jesus saw himself as the messenger, bringing the news that God reigns.
Yes, but the way that he described God's reign, it surprised everybody. I mean, think, a powerful, successful kingdom. It needs to be strong, able to impose its will, able to defeat its enemies. But Jesus said the greatest person in God's kingdom was the weakest, the one who loves and who serves the poor. And he said that you live under God's reign when you respond to evil by loving your enemies and forgiving them and seeking peace. This is an upside-down kingdom.
I have so much that I could say on this, but I think what I want to say is like, look at the nature of Jesus's kingdom, and it is completely contrary to the nations of this world, right? Jesus comes to be a warrior king, but by shedding his own blood, not shedding the blood of his enemies. And so anytime we try to meld this idea of like Jesus plus worldly power, like we end up looking more like the guy on the left than we do the suffering servant, than like Jesus. We become the abusers. We become those who, in the name of Christ, drop bombs. Or in the name of Christ, harshly punish people we disagree with. And that's just not the way of our King.
Yeah, and getting back to this idea of it's not just the death of Christ, but it's also everything that he did when he was alive and all of his teaching, between his like ministries of mercy, of going around and healing people, and not always people that liked him or that he liked or that they would have gotten along with, but then also thinking about his teaching, like his most famous message is probably the Sermon on the Mount. And that phrase, upside down kingdom, is just throughout it. Like, who is blessed in this kingdom? Well, it's the poor in spirit. And it's those who mourn. It's those who hunger and thirst, not so that they can have their stomachs filled, but they're thirsting for righteousness. And they're the peacemakers. Like, they're all the people that our worldly systems of power would say, yeah, that's not blessing. That's, ridiculousness. And yet Jesus says, no, that's what it means to be in this kingdom. That's what my kingdom people look like.
People who are walking with Jesus often look like failures in this world. Mm-hmm. They look like those who are on the margins, who do not have the power. And I think this video is helping us recapture a sense of that.
Now, Jesus also said that this kingdom was arriving with him.
Yeah, so for example, there's this really interesting story where there's a high-ranking Roman officer, and he comes to Jesus begging him to heal his servant. And he even calls Jesus his Lord, acknowledging that Jesus is his authority. Jesus praises this man for recognizing what no one else yet had, that not only was Jesus announcing God's kingdom, he was the king.
And so the word gets out that this Jewish man from Galilee is talking and acting like he's the king of Israel. He's appointing 12 disciples, which are an image of Israel's 12 tribes. He's healing people.
Goosebumps.
I love the little glow of the crown, right? And then he gets a literal crown at his crucifixion.
Mm-hmm. And just that image of the Roman soldier recognizing who Jesus is and falling at his feet, I think is a little bit of that taste of what we know will happen when Jesus returns, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess and all the powers of this world will recognize that Jesus has been the king all along. And we don't get to see that in our life yet, but we get to see glimmers of it. And I think that story is one of them.
Yeah, and I love that, Jesus doesn't necessarily say you have to stop being a Roman centurion, but he does acknowledge, I am the king. You are right. There's a beginning of a journey there. Mm-hmm. I'm curious where that centurion's journey left, right? A lot of those early believers, mm-hmm. they couldn't serve in the military. They didn't go to the theater, and it's not that isolationism is the solution for holiness, right? But there was something about radically transforming your life. And I think if you're struggling with, I want to follow Jesus, I want to know the way of Jesus, I don't want to get caught up in the cultural trappings of what others say that Jesus is like. I want to truly encounter him. There's always opportunity to come like that centurion to Jesus, fall at his feet and say, I don't get this. I'm not very good at this. Show me the way. Heal my servant, heal me.
Forgiving people their sins.
And all of this so threatened Israel's leaders that they finally decide to have him killed. And Jesus let them.
Yeah, which is a weird thing to do if you're trying to become king.
That's right. But for Jesus, this is what had to happen. Jesus saw the sin and the devastation of his people Israel as just one small part of the entire human condition. How all humanity has rebelled against God, resulting in the tragedy and devastation of our whole world. And so how is God going to bring his reign over such a world?
That's such a great question. How is God going to bring his reign over such a world? And there's a lot of divided thought on what that looks like, right? Mm-hmm. Is it get the 10 Commandments in schools, pass laws that make people behave more like Christians? Is it to destroy Islam or other nations that disagree with us? And I think the resounding answer from the Gospels is no. The way of Christ is the way of the cross. It's the way of self-sacrifice, of suffering, of dying for our enemies. It's the way of loving our enemies. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that I love how they kind of are showing these different cultures in the illustration here. It reminds me of Darren Aronofsky's Noah. They have a scene where he's talking about Cain killing Abel, and they kind of rapid fire go through, and it becomes all these different images of violence and power and struggle. A lot of weird stuff in that movie, but that's a really nice part of it. But this idea of whatever the gospel is, whatever this good news is, it has to transcend culture and time. It has to be something that is something we can engage with and we can participate in and we can benefit from in this life, no matter where we're living and when we're living. And so anytime our gospel becomes narrow to the point of, well, I'm able to benefit from it right now, but the way that I'm benefiting from the gospel, the way I'm engaging with the gospel, well, that wouldn't have worked for someone living under Roman oppression, or that wouldn't work for someone living in another part of the world. I think it's a good hint that we're maybe missing a part of the gospel. We're narrowing it too much to be something that is for us. And like, as an American, I think sometimes we do that as Americans.
Yeah, I think one of the real downsides of thinking of America as a Christian nation is that it condenses a cosmic faith into a tribal, localized, like my tribe. And, it's not like we're saying, wow, you can also become this. Like, it becomes like this very us versus them, right? And then suddenly the things we do become baptized in the name of Jesus. I think that leads really unhealthy places. But Jesus came to redeem the cosmos. Jesus came to redeem everyone on every part of the globe. And that does not mean making them look more like me. Like in my culture, it means helping them become the human beings God has created them to be in their culture, in their time, in their place.
Yeah.
Jesus believed it would be through an act of sacrificial love for his enemies. This is why in the Gospels, Jesus' crucifixion is depicted as his enthronement as the King of the Jews.
Yeah, he receives a crown. He also receives a robe.
He's exalted up, not onto a throne, but onto the cross.
How beautiful are the feet that bring good news.
The way that the gospel authors talk about Jesus' crucifixion is so beautiful and literary and intentional. The language that they use, the way that God had it happen so that it was this enthronement, and even Pilate, who was the political leader of the time, decides to write Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews on the placard there, right? And there are people that are upset by that because they say, don't say that he's our king, say he claimed to be our king. Pilate's like, I've written what I've written. Like, it was something that was just inescapable in that moment for those who were witnessing it. That symbolic meaning was so present and so there, and the gospel authors really capture that in a beautiful way.
Yeah, he has a crown of thorns. He has a royal robe with purple. He is high and lifted up. He is like, on a king, you'd have like an elevated position. He is elevated. There's all of these symbols that like, this is Jesus's inauguration, which is interesting to think about that. Like, yeah, he was the king before he came, but he was like a pre-enthronement king.
Yeah.
You used a really great illustration.
Yeah, so when I talk about this with my students, we talk about the idea of someone who's like the prince, like their father is the king, and then, the minute the father dies, that son now becomes the king. He is the king, but there's still this coronation ceremony that they go through to recognize him as the king. And so when Jesus is born, the wise men see a star, and it says, where is he born? King of the Jews, right? And that's why Herod tries to kill him, because from his birth, he is king. So it's not that this is him becoming king because he earned it through something in his life, but it's just this visible public demonstration and recognition of who he's been all along.
And the good news now is that Jesus has defeated death and that he reigns as king, that he's dealt with our sin and corruption himself, and that he's conquered it with his life and with his love.
And then Jesus sends his followers to go out and keep announcing this good news of the upside-down kingdom.
And to invite everyone to give their allegiance to him, the king who defeated death with his love.
They do such a good job paralleling this image from the Old Testament with the messenger coming to bring this news of hope, and then Jesus is the messenger, but then Jesus is the hope, and then the women who see that he has conquered death are the messengers, and we get to be the messenger. Something that's so amazing and beautiful about the Bible is how there are these themes that are just woven throughout, even though it's a book, really an anthology of books written over the course of thousands of years by dozens of people. It's clearly telling this one beautiful story that God is writing. And so they do such a nice job picking up on that.
Yeah, like big picture, right? This video begins with them in exile, wondering how they got here. Mm-hmm. They got there because of their own injustices, oppression, sin, and rebellion. And a king comes and takes the consequences of those things upon himself to then create a people who go out and announce his kingship and demonstrate his delivery, mm-hmm. his freedom, his release of the captives to others, and bring healing, right? His followers are the ones that take that posture of self-sacrificial love. And what I am reminded by this and called to anew is to say, like, are we doing that? Mm. Are we doing that? And I hope you'll examine your own life. Are you taking the posture of like the big guy with the sword, right, who hits the other, whether it's obviously not physically, but like politically, socially? Or are you taking the posture, am I taking the posture of the suffering servant? Because that's how we demonstrate, that's how we bring the good news, that with feet that are wounded, like Jesus.
Yeah. It starts in this hopelessness where they were feeling abandoned, and it was because they had brought it upon themselves, and yet God enters into that hopelessness. He became human. He took on flesh in order to die for all the things that they had done. And so I think that is a really beautiful message for anybody that's feeling a little hopeless, who's feeling like, man, there's a lot of chaos in this world and confusion, and I'm not sure how I fit into that. And I know that I've done things wrong, and that, man, God has every right to abandon me and leave me to my own devices. But he doesn't, and he didn't, and he won't.
Praise the Lord.
And so I think that's a message of good news. And for those of us that know that good news, who have been redeemed by it and our lives have been changed by it, how do we go out and not only tell people that with our words, but how do we demonstrate that to them with our love? Jesus says that, they will know who you are because you love one another and you demonstrate that self-sacrificial love to others. And so if you know people in your life who are feeling chaotic and confused and hopeless and desperate, like, what does it look like to demonstrate self-sacrificial love towards them? And then say, the reason I'm doing this is because I've experienced that love for myself in the person of Christ.